And welcome to our second set in our series of programs. Just a couple of announcements first. This is sponsored by JSurge, which is the nonprofit that we work for. It's a trans-denominational organization that is dedicated to bringing Judaism to Jews wherever and however they practice. We have two websites. One is JSurge.org, and that is a website that is devoted to Tikkun Olam, fixing the world. It is also devoted to helping and setting up information about Judaism, and also providing services for those people who would like to find Jewish meaning and Jewish rituals. We act as shidduch makers. We are matchmakers between clergy and non-clergy in life cycle events. We also have just started a new website called JMorim, which is dedicated to educators and for those wanting education. And it is a matchmaking service for bringing educators support and materials. A couple of administrative announcements. One, as we continue, we will be working on this program. And if you have a question, since you are all on mute, there are two ways to indicate that you have a question. The first is to raise your hand, not your physical hand, but if you go, for most of you, on the bottom of your screen where it says reactions, if you press on reactions, you'll have either a thumbs up or a hand. If you press the hand, we will know that you are interested in asking a question. And when we set questions up, when we take the questions, we will unmute you for your question. The other way is in the chat room. If you'll post your question on chat, when we do questions, we will then take them. I should stress as we go forward that this has not been rehearsed. We have a series of questions that people have submitted, but in general, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. So that said, just on a serious note, before we begin the program, let's take a moment of silence for all the events that have transpired over the past several months, and specifically over the past couple of weeks. The lives that have been lost, the lives that have been ruined, the lives that have been changed. And what we ask is a moment of silence as we remember all of them. Thank you. I am here with my three daughters, Rachel, Meira, and Merav, and they will be answering questions. The first question to ask for the three of you, whoever wants to answer, is, as a rabbi's kid, and by the way, the word rabbi's kid is also, we then say RK. As an RK, what is one of the funniest things that's ever happened to you?
Wait, you never told us we were answering questions.
Sorry, I'm an RK. No one told me this.
You want us to take a second and introduce ourselves first for those who might not know us?
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
I think we should do oldest to youngest.
Okay, thank you, Meira, so much. Okay, I'm Rachel, spelled R-A-H-E-L. I live in New York. I'm the eldest. I have red hair. Meira, your turn.
I'm Meira. I live in Washington, D.C., and I work as a psychotherapist here, and I am the middle.
And I'm Merav. You might have guessed that I am the youngest at this point. I live in New York City. I work as a special education teacher in a public high school, and that's me. Yeah, in a nutshell. And I'm an RK.
We all just found out that we're going to be answering questions.
May I proceed?
Not get ready for this at all.
Yes.
What is one of the funniest things that's ever happened to you as an RK?
The Funniest things that ever happened to me. I mean, let's get personal real fast, because I feel like I know all of you very well, everybody here. Some of you I actually do know very well. Well, I once had a boyfriend.
What?
Abba, cover your ears. Okay. I was 16 and I had a boyfriend. And I had met him in Israel when I was on a summer program. And his name was Jonathan. I won't say his last name. And he came to visit me in Millburn. And, he took the train and I dropped him off to go home. And when I got home, I got a phone call from my father and said, how was the visit with your boyfriend? And he was like, I just found out about it from a congregant who saw you at the train station.
Story of our lives.
Story of our lives.
Story of our lives.
Yes. So I think that was probably one of the funniest things that ever happened to me.
I can honestly say I have no memory of that.
It's okay.
So here's another question. What is one of the saddest things that's ever happened to you as an RK?
So, I mean, as I think almost everyone in here knows, our parents are divorced.
What?
I'm so sorry, Rachel.
Sure.
I should know better than to relay information to my sisters like that on a Zoom call. But our parents are divorced. And it happened while, obviously, we were RKs. And it was being an RK, you're in a public light. And that's part of your life. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes it's really hard to go through traumatic events like that in the public eye. And I think it's not so much one event as it is to know that it's a sad thing to go through, and it's a sad thing to go through when it's also very public. And so I think growing up as a preteen and a teenager where, many people are aware of what's going on was a very sad thing to deal with for a very long time.
I agree. I think that is.
Not to put a bummer on everyone's day.
Yeah, way to start, I feel like I had us with a high after being caught, and then you brought us down.
You can go back to funniest moments if you want.
Well, let's go from the sublime to the ridiculous. What is the weirdest congregant experience you've ever had?
Oh, Abba, we're too good as RKs to answer that question.
There are no
You will not get an answer from us.
Yeah.
There is no way that we're going there at all. Am I in agreement? Agreement?
I don't know what you're talking about. There's no such thing as a weird congregant.
I mean, I think that part of the art of being an RK is that once you finally realize you are one, because I think for a long time, unless it's explained to you, you don't really understand it, especially because you're so young, and we were so young, obviously, when you're at your first pulpit, that you kind of figure out and learn how to navigate in certain ways. And we always joke about being RKs because it's not like there was a rule book or anybody explained it to us or there were rules of any kind. We kind of just picked up on things as we went. So there's no way that we would ever answer a question about a congregant or something that someone would try to identify because we just wouldn't do that. Fair?
Fair.
I feel like everybody here is really disappointed because they
I know.
signed on because they wanted to hear all this stuff.
Disappointed,
Yeah, I see you nodding.
Easy.
They're like, yeah, dish.
All right, well then let me ask you a different question. When did you first realize you were an RK?
Well, let me tweak the question a little bit. I think I first realized what it meant during our first Rosh Hashanah at B'nai Israel, when I wasn't allowed in the sanctuary because there were all these rules about coming in and when you can come out and the doors opening. And I remember turning to the usher, I must have been 8 maybe, and just looking up at whoever it was and just saying, do you know who I am? Like, as if that would allow me to go in the middle of Kedusha or whatever it was. And he was like, yes. And I was like, then the door must be open. And I think that was the first moment that I realized that being an RK was, you know, in my mind, I felt like I had free reign of coming in and going out and being in the sanctuary and not. And it didn't occur to me that everybody didn't have free reign. And I remember having to pull that out of my hat and being so frustrated by that. And then I remember telling you about it and you bursting out laughing about it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would agree. I think anytime that I kind of had that moment of, I'm an RK, I can get away with doing this. Like when we would go through, for those of you who don't know, our father's office has a front door that led out to the lobby area, and he has a side door that leads directly into the sanctuary. So I would just walk in and out of that door because I wanted to, because I could, because I was an RK. And I think, you know, knowing I could do that, and then the moment I did that and everyone would turn around like, who's doing that? And I was so young, I think everyone just smiled. But knowing I could do that was kind of like, I have some power here. I'm an RK, and I kind of like felt some status with it. Side door was very powerful.
You know, I was just thinking like that is probably the first time that we figured out that we were RKs, that we had access and we had kind of free range. But I don't think it's until you get older that you also realize the difficult side of being an RK, of not being able to do certain things or say certain things because to have to censor yourself and limit yourself because everybody's watching. So I think it's funny because Rachel tells that story and I have the exact same story with my like best friend from childhood. Her name was Stephanie, and it was Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, and I got us in when the doors were closed. And I was going to tell that story later, and Rachel stole it from me because we all have the exact same experiences. And then as she was telling it, I was like, yeah, that's like a very like 8-year-old view of RK, what it means.
Yeah.
Well, lest everyone should think it only happens with 8-year-olds. I seem to remember since I'm the Emeritus at B'nai Israel, my last high holidays there, I seem to remember one of my daughters, who shall go nameless, using that same trick to get into the service. Do you know who I am? Because, and just barging past the usher.
Yeah, but kidding, your granddaughters used it. Your granddaughters used it. I have 3 kids. My oldest is 13 now, and so she was 12 during the last time that we had Rosh Hashanah at B'nai Israel. And I remember her finding me, and she was like, "They wouldn't let me in." And I was like, "Do you know who I am?" And I was like, "Oh, this is life repeating itself."
So following up what you just said, let me ask this question then, which is, how did being an RK, or did being an RK, in any way, how did it affect your friendships, your school, as you were growing up?
Who wants to go first?
I guess I will go first. I think it does. It does affect your friendships and your relationships, partially because like everybody's watching. So if you act out, or if you behave in a way that reflects badly on your parent, right? Like I think the rabbi or clergy in general, I think is the only job that has in our community has access to both someone's professional life and personal life. And I think at some point that dawns on you as an RK that you are part of your parents' job and you are a reflection, and that could help them or hurt them.
And go ahead, Merav.
After you.
I was going to say, I don't know that I felt it at the time. I think maybe in retrospect as an adult, I look back and realize that there were certain things I did or didn't do, or ways that I might have acted with friendships. But I remember at the time, the only difficult part was in whether people really wanted to be friends with you, because I think there was a wariness of, if we're too close with you, then maybe the rabbi will find out things about our family. But I think in wading through that as a kid in elementary school, for me, I was able to find some really good friends. And I remember being really excited to have friends. I mean, I also remember the times when my father would accidentally leave me in the synagogue on Friday night with my friends and just walk home without me because he totally forgot that I was there. But I digress. But I remember having it was fun. And I will say I felt different. I went to a different school, and there were different, we kept Shabbat differently, and we kept kosher. And when I went to my friends, bat mitzvahs who were, members of the synagogue, there was usually I could eat something, but sometimes I couldn't. So I think there was always a little bit of a distinction, but I look back on it pretty fondly and I don't know that I saw it at the time.
I will say similar experience because, as Raquel said, we didn't go to school in Millburn, and we didn't go to school with anybody who was a congregant, or at least I didn't. I'm going to yeshiva, 20, 25 minutes away. So I had two spheres. I had school and my school friends, and then I had, shul and shul friends. And it was two very different worlds because at school I wasn't an RK. Meaning, I was obviously an RK, but no one really cared because it wasn't their rabbi. And so it was a very different dynamic between my school life and then my weekend life. And I do agree, I think it did have some effect on friendships, but I think that only really started to sink in once we got older as young kids. I think being able to say, hey, let's take our kiddush food and go into the office, or let's go hang out in the coat room underneath all the coats and hide there and no one can tell us we can't because I'm the rabbi's kid. We never did that. It was a lot of fun.
So did being an RK in any way influence your choice of career or your lifestyle or your values?
You want me to go first? Oh, Meira just walked away. Oh, you're back. I'll go first. I mean, I think it did. I don't know that I realized it at the time. I think that as an eldest child and probably as an RK, I had a real need to not just excel, but also to add value in whatever I was doing. And for those of you who don't know me, although I do know a lot of people on this Zoom, I'm a former sex crimes and child abuse prosecutor. I'm an attorney. I currently work in a division of a security company working in the sexual misconduct field where I travel the country and I train on abuse prevention and sexual misconduct prevention, and I do consulting and I do investigations. So I work in a helping profession, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think that for me, when I chose to go to law school, it was really about being able to do justice in some way or to add value in some way. And I've defined that as something that I do through my career, really through my career. So I think that on some level, having a values-driven home and a values-driven life led to my need to want to pursue a values-driven career. And I think that also in terms of where I ended up, I live in a very specific community. My husband and 3 children, we all live here. And one of the reasons why we chose the community that we live in is because of the Jewish diversity that exists here, and really honestly, the lack of politicalness when it comes to synagogue hopping. We have there's a huge Orthodox community, a huge modern Orthodox community, a huge conservative community, a huge Reform community, and people travel from synagogue to synagogue and walk from place to place and have friends in all communities. And the schools pull from everywhere as well. And I think that for us, we really wanted a community with as much Jewish diversity as possible. And so I think that it definitely drove us to pick a place that fit us in that way.
I don't know if being an RK had such a heavy hand on my choosing of a profession. I think that was a mixture of many other things. But I will say that I think being an RK prepared me for being an educator. for sure. And working with a diverse group of people of all different ages, of definitely working through the politics of any job. I felt much more prepared entering a work field at a very young age of 23 because I was able to maneuver the politics of school from things I had learned as an RK.
Yeah. I think it had a lot to do with my choice of profession. I think specifically Abba and B'nai Israel did a lot of work when it comes to tikkun olam. Sorry. And so I think a lot of my upbringing, that was a huge focus, right? Of thinking about other people and working for other people and bringing some good into the world. And I had a lot of people that I met through the shul and my father's work and life, and I see some of them here on this call, who had a lot of influence over that decision to go into social work and become a therapist and kind of try and do good.
It's true. I mean, look, I see Judge Klein on here, and you were my first internship in the legal field. So, I mean, that was a long time ago, but it's true.
Wasn't going to do shout outs, but
I
Beth,
mean,
you helped me decide on grad school. So there you go.
So let's, if anyone would like to, let's take a short space here. If anyone would like to ask a question, either put it in the chat or raise your hand. I can't see everyone raising their hand, but our resident magician Joe can see hands that are being raised, hopefully. So one question we have is, as an RK, did you enjoy certain exemptions or privileges?
I mean, I think there were, I don't think we got exemptions. I mean,
cookies.
We got cookies a lot. That's true. We did get cookies a lot. There was a lot of, and wasn't that Merav who was the one who really got, when we first, no, Merav wasn't born. Who was it? Meira, was it you?
It was Meira.
It was you. We definitely got our share of cookies.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of privileges, I don't know that we got privileges. I think we were just known. I think there were a lot of people that helped us along the way, whether it was with our career or with school decisions, in terms of being a resource. But I think that at least my own experience was the work had to be done by us. People could help us in terms of, having conversations with us and guiding us. But the bottom line is, when we were, whether it was applying to college or law school or grad school, I mean, it was on us. We had a responsibility to do that. So I don't know that beyond the cookies and kind of being known, there were privileges. Although I will say that I got to take my 12-year-old to McRoberts, Kentucky with my dad's last trip with B'nai Israel in preparation for her bat mitzvah, and they had never let a child come that was that young before. So maybe like that was a privilege. Beyond that, I don't know. Merav, what do you think?
I think that for me, there was a certain amount of a privilege, but I think the privilege was being treated as an adult at a very early age, because
Right.
I led groups on Shabbat, and I remember I don't remember when I started, but I remember being young when I first started doing groups and doing like Tat Shabbat, whichever groups I was doing. So no one prepares you for when a kid almost does throw apple juice at you. That was probably one of the most interesting experience that prepared me for teaching high school, was Tat Shabbat, now that I think about it. But being given those opportunities at a young age, being allowed to be a bar and bat mitzvah tutor while I was in college, there were, I think, a lot of privileges, but mainly it just came from, I think as Rachel said, there was a certain amount of adultness that we gave off, and there was a level of responsibility that we were given, and maybe that's because we were an RK, or maybe that was because we were very responsible, and there was a level of trust, I think, that went to us in those positions of power.
We have a tough question. which I'll admit from the beginning. A question of what was it like watching your parents' marriage disintegrate while living in a fishbowl?
Not ideal.
Fine. Was a
Not ideal.
I
It
don't
was
know.
so
I
fun.
think
It was
most
so
people
fun.
want to watch that happen in a fishbowl.
more like an aquarium than anything else.
Yeah, it was definitely more like an aquarium because it was a long time.
One of those in the basement that's really dark.
Very fun.
Yeah, super fun, like party fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it was unenjoyable, but the truth is, I will say, and again, my experience was different. I was in college, and so I wasn't living at home when my parents divorced. But I will say that, you know, I found people to be, for the most part, respectful. I do remember that there were occasional people who, when I would come home for the weekend, would ask, you know, in that very like, how are you doing? Expecting like some deep, dark information. And I remember probably responding in some facetious way that was quasi obnoxious, if not completely. But Meira, Merav, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I made this point before, but I think, you know, it bears highlighting now, you know, rabbis, clergy in general, I guess not just rabbis, they're, you know, okay, I'll put it this way. I get to go to work and I have a professional persona that the people that I work with know. And then I get to go home and I get to take that off and I get to be me. And I imagine that most people here have experienced something similar. And clergy don't get a chance to do that, and their children don't get a chance to do that either. They're personal. People feel like they have a right to access the private lives of their clergy, because clergy are kind of public and private figures. And to be fair, you know, clergy touches people's lives in very personal ways. So it does feel like people want that access back. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. And for kids, that can be quite difficult. So leave it there.
As I said before, it was one of the saddest, and I'd say the hardest times of being an RK was being in, because I was 10 when it started. So I grew up, I would say, for the second half of my life in the synagogue in this field of this going on. Mind you, my grandmother was also dying at the same time. That was extremely traumatic as well. So there were times where I think people would ask me how I'm doing, and instead, and knowing they were talking about my parents' impending divorce, I would respond with, well, my grandmother, she's doing okay today. She's having a good day. And I would focus back on that. Because I do agree, there is some level of, I think there were a lot of people who genuinely wanted to care, because they had grown, they had seen me. I mean, I was born while my father was there. There were people who knew me since I was a child in the nursery calling for my grandmother who was down the hall. There were people who had seen me grow up. And I do think there was a genuine concern from certain people who wanted to make sure I was okay. And that was very much appreciated. I will say that. It was very much appreciated to know that there were people who cared, but it was a difficult thing to field of, what can I say? What can't I say? What do people know? What don't people know? And it was a minefield to navigate as a 10-year-old.
So not ideal.
No.
Yeah, I feel like we could have summed this all up with a quick, like, not that great.
The question is the saddest part of being an RK?
All right, so let's, a different question then. What was the most embarrassing moment you ever had as an RK?
Got this. All right.
Yikes.
Just want to preface this. Got this. I appreciate anyone who, you know, loves our family and is interested in our family. But being constantly, or people constantly trying to set me up with their sons was never a non-awkward experience, particularly when the sons were in the room at the time. There were multiple times where people would say, oh, you and my son, you'd get along great. And I'd be like, that's awesome. He's at that table over there. Why don't you go and talk to him? And it was never a non-awkward experience.
Merav, I really
Yeah.
thought you were going to go with the times that you used to hold your dress up on the
That's
beam.
not embarrassing. I chose to do that purposely for attention. And I am
We're
proud.
going to talk about the
Oh,
time
wait.
that
Maybe those were the most embarrassing
No,
moments for
still have
us.
this day of lifting my skirt up as a 3-year-old to show off to everyone in the synagogue.
That you were out of diapers and wearing
Talking
underwear.
about it, like 30 years later just shows how monumental that moment was. I am proud.
If I may interject, what Meirav is usually referring to happened at bar mitzvahs,
All
where
the
a guest
time.
would come up and say, "Wouldn't you like to meet my son?" So, anyone else have an embarrassing moment?
Meira?
I think Merav just has them all.
It's true. I think she does.
Grandma.
I mean, I did reference that.
Yeah, Meirav, we always make fun of Meirav because when she was
Yeah.
little and in the nursery school,
We're
and
really
my
gonna do this now.
Oh yeah, we're
Oh, yeah,
telling
we're
this
definitely
now.
doing
We're
this.
telling it.
and my
There was a
grandmother
bathroom.
was the secretary of the religious school, and so the nursery school bathroom that she would use was right near the religious school office. So Meirav would constantly, as like a young toddler, she'd be
was like
done going to
3.
the bathroom.
Yeah.
Whatever, she was like,
was
and
like 3.
and you'd hear like yelling out in the hallway of the synagogue, "Grandma, I'm ready to be wiped, Grandma!" And like no matter where she was, she would have to come.
You want to talk about perks? It worked. It worked. You want to talk about perks? The minute I opened my mouth and said that, my grandmother came.
True, by the way.
And one of the biggest perks was having that kind of power.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely.
So what was one of the gutsiest things? What was one of the gutsiest things you ever did, or chutzpahdik things you ever did as an RK?
I feel like my bat mitzvah speech was a little bit chutzpahdik. Like
You
a little
mean
gutsy.
the one we had to change?
No, not when you taught me the wrong portion, the other one that we wrote, right? Because that's so fun. Also, the times when your dad gets everything right for everybody else, and it's like a month before your bat mitzvah, and you realized you learned the wrong one because it's not Rosh Chodesh, it's not Rosh Chodesh. So that was a fun experience, but I had a 2-part bat mitzvah where I read Torah on Sunday for Rosh Chodesh, and then on Saturday, I basically had I gave a big speech, and we had a big kiddush for the whole shul, and there seemed to be at the time what felt like a lot of controversy as to the fact that I was reading Torah on Sunday as opposed to on Shabbat, and we were balancing a bunch of different things. And so I remember when I was writing the speech, I remember being annoyed that the only focus should have been that it was my bat mitzvah. Like, it shouldn't matter what I was doing or what I wasn't doing or who was annoyed by it or who was okay by it. So I remember saying to my dad, we were sitting in our office in our basement at the time, and I was like, I'm basically going to tell everybody that I think the line was something like, if you have a question about what I'm doing here today, then you might as well not be here, because there needs to be room for everybody, or there isn't going to be room for anybody, in like a very dramatic fashion. I don't remember exactly what the line was, but I do remember looking up when I was giving it, kind of sending a message to everybody that, it's really not about what everybody thinks. It's really about what I'm doing, and let's celebrate this milestone and make sure that it's positive for me, because at 12, I had a little bit of a streak of redheaded chutzpah in me. It's never gone away. Abba, do you remember that?
I do.
Did you get flack for that?
Nope, not at all.
So great.
Maybe no one was listening. Who knows?
Maybe no one was listening. I did have a bright pink dress, which did not go well with my hair. So maybe that was
Yikes.
blinding. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to take that question?
Are you just gonna pretend that I'm the most chutzpahdik kid?
Some of the chutzpahdik things.
You
that
are
we
the most
love.
chutzpahdik.
I am.
Yeah. You know, just normal day-to-day occurrences. I feel like we the little things, the do you know who I am kind of thing.
Okay. It is noted that of the three of you, none of you have gone into a profession that involves the Jewish community. Is that a response to being an RK?
So I don't know that that's totally accurate, actually, only because I spent many years along with my husband working as the in-house youth directors at a synagogue, as well as the people on a college campus running a minyan, which we actually did in our spare time, not in our actual careers. So I've always looked at the fact that my career might not be in Jewish education, but my informal career has always been that way. So I don't know. I don't see it that way. Merav?
Meira.
Sorry.
You go first.
Yeah, I also don't 100% see it that way. I don't necessarily have a career at a Jewish agency or as Jewish clergy, but I work with I think I use a lot of what I know and a lot of my skills to help the Jewish community. And a lot of the research that I do is around trauma in insular communities, focusing on the Jewish community. So, but I guess in a traditional sense, that might be true. And so in a traditional sense, probably it's nice to go to shul and not be sitting in the front row and not have, not be looked at in that way. It's nice to be able to go and just kind of enjoy shul for what it is, or not, and not go and people not wonder where you are. To bring what's been public into the more realm is not totally unenjoyable.
I don't think it had really any influence on me teaching in a public school as opposed to a yeshiva or Schechter. When I first went into teaching, I had multiple conversations with my father, several other educators who work both in a public school and yeshiva setting, and just career-wise, when looking for stability and opportunities, the public school sphere was going to give me more offerings than working in a yeshiva. And so that was sort of the track that I went on. But I tutor on the side, and I happen to tutor within one of the shul communities. I actually tutor the rabbi's kids at that shul. And they've given my name to other congregants, and I've tutored several of his congregants as well. So I still work within a community necessarily, but no, I don't think being an RK affected my career in that sense.
So, Meira, this question actually comes on the heels of what you just said, which is, being an RK, has it influenced you, or how has it influenced you in working with rabbis or in your interactions with rabbis?
Great question. I think that I have, I like to think I have some understanding of the toll that being clergy takes. And so I think in that way, it can be nice for clergy to work with somebody who is from that world. I think oftentimes when we're dealing with hardships, we look for connections with people that we're going to work with, right? Something that we feel that they can understand what we've been through. Maybe not everything, but just small connections that make them seem like like a comfortable person to talk to. And so I think I do have some understanding in that way and some insight into the toll that it takes on the daily life. And so, yeah, I think that affects my work with them. Hope that answers that.
Rachel, Merav?
I think that I understand wait, go back to what exactly the question was. Was it?
How has being an RK influenced how you interact with rabbis?
I think I think for me, what it did was really force, when we were choosing a place to live, really force us to look at the rabbinic figures and say, where are we most comfortable and who are we most comfortable with? I think we've met a lot of rabbis in our time, and I think that it's very easy for us as RKs to kind of identify where we feel comfortable and where we don't, and who we feel comfortable with and who we don't. I have had, throughout my education, many interactions with rabbis where I have just, rolled my eyes and not felt positively about it. So I think for me, it really impacted finding a place where I enjoy the rabbis here and I enjoy the clergy here, and I find them to be very real and genuine, which was not always the case. I think it made me appreciate finding those things more significantly.
That's interesting. Sorry.
Go for it.
Can I just, I wanted to just go back to what I said for a second. It's interesting now that I re-listened to the question, I'm actually going to take it and turn it on its head. I think, so of course, like all sane people in the middle of a global pandemic, I'm looking to move. My family, we're looking to move, and we have been looking to move for a long time. So, still in the area, but just to a new community with more space and et cetera, et cetera. And when we were shul hopping a few months ago, one of the things that I looked for was actually, of course I wanted to talk to the rabbi and see about them, but I also looked at the community and how they spoke about the rabbi,
Mm-hmm.
and their history of treating clergy, because I think it's a relationship. And I think people don't realize how important that is for the community clergy relationship, the community side of it. And so I looked almost more at that, because rabbis come and go, but how a community kind of instills in the next generation how to treat their clergy, how to act to them. I think that has a lasting effect. And so when I'm picking a community that I want to stay in long term, that's something that I'm looking for.
Totally.
Agreed.
Meira, I totally agree.
I'll say that on some level, it definitely, I have to agree with Rachel in the sense of growing up with a rabbi and as my father. For those of you who don't know, I live in the Upper West Side, and there are numerous amounts of shuls and minions all over the place. And when I started living here, and I would try out different ones, and a big thing to me was the community, but also the rabbi. And I would go up to the rabbis afterwards and introduce myself. And oftentimes, depending on their reactions or things like that, would give me a sense of the shul itself. And I remember a conversation I had with my father. There was one Shabbat, this was years ago, I went to one of the conservative minions, and I remember being there, and the Torah reader didn't show up. For whatever reason, the Torah reader never showed up, and someone went to the rabbi and said, can you lane? And he refused. Flat out, he goes, I don't read Torah. That's not part of my job, and walked out. And I remember being so angry, and I called my father and I said, how could how could he do that? I couldn't, it really put a bad taste in my mouth, because, there's a way to deal with it. There's a way to talk, and there's a way to act when you are in that position of power. And I think that it gives me, I'm much more, I think, picky with the communities that I choose, because I'm looking for a very specific feel. And I don't want to just pick a place because it's there. I want a place that's welcoming, that's open, that reminds me of the sense that I got when I was growing up, in a sense.
Yeah, agreed.
So we'll take a short break to take any questions if anyone has. Again, just hit the reaction by raising your hand, or just put it into the chat. So as we continue then, and looking around and looking at what we have, let me, there are only 2 questions left at this point, unless other people have, which is, what advice would you give to RKs who are growing up as right now?
I mean, I would,
Oh,
go ahead, go ahead.
don't let your parents go into the rabbit hole. Not a good idea. Just choose something else. Be a doctor.
You know what? It's funny because I remember when I was in high school, I went on a weekend at a local rabbinic seminary for teenagers, really for teens, arcade teens. It was like a weekend Shabbaton that was hosted in New York, where rabbis' kids from all over were welcome to come. And I remember, I think I was in 10th grade, and I went because I was so interested to meet other RKs, and just because it seemed like it would be a lot of fun. And I went, and I remember that Shabbat afternoon after lunch, instead of bringing in a speaker to speak to us or somebody to learn with us or something like that, I actually brought in a series of therapists. And we all sat in this like big circle, and I didn't realize they were therapists at the time, and they started basically doing like group therapy. And I just remember looking around being like, I am not angry, and lots of people are angry. And like, it was, you had to answer what's the thing you hate the most about being an RK. And I remember being like, uh-oh, if I don't find something, people are not going to want to be friends with me, because I'm just going to sound like I'm, I'm just trying to find the silver lining. But really, there was so much anger in that room. And I remember thinking, I do not feel this way at all. And I was totally different. I went to an all-girls Orthodox high school. I did not go to my dad's synagogue every single Shabbat in high school. I would walk to where my friends were at a local Orthodox synagogue. I mean, I didn't have any of the anger that a lot of these kids had. And what I remember hearing was, my parent makes me do things to show how great they are. I have to come to every service on time. I have to sit there. I'm not allowed to leave to go to the bathroom. I'm not allowed to talk. I'm not allowed to do things. And so what I would say is, if as an RK, that's the type of dynamic that's set, have an honest conversation with your parents about what your needs are, because I think that if your parents are able to prioritize what your needs are as a kid, then there's no resentment. And I think that actually one of the best parts of my experience is I never felt as though I had to do something. I never felt as though I had to be there at a specific time, or that my doing or not doing something reflected on my dad. And as an adult, I totally recognized that on some level it probably did, but I never heard about it. And I think that that's part of the reason why both Meira and Merav and I can be on this call today, is because for us, even though there were ups and downs and pros and cons, it wasn't a miserable experience at all. And I think a lot of RKs have a really hard time because they're told they have to do the job too.
I would say, I think very well said, and I completely agree with everything Rachel just said. My advice would be, find something you enjoy and do it. I remember when I was very young, what gave me my favorite part of going to shul was helping the custodian Joe. After services, I would go around and I would help him pick up all the books, and I would help him do every little thing. And I had so much fun helping him. And I don't remember who, and I don't remember the situation, but I remember someone coming up to me at some point and saying, you don't have to do that. And I remember saying, but I want to. It's fun. I'm having fun. And I would say to an RK, have fun. Find something, whether maybe it's leading groups, maybe it's having that, responsibility, and maybe it's just something as simple as doing something you enjoy while you're there and having fun with it.
What they said.
Meira?
I agree with what they said. They said it so well.
Okay, another question we have is, how does being an RK relate to your Jewish practice today?
Who wants to go first?
I mean, I call you up for halacha questions all the time. So I did it on Friday. So, I mean, I think I feel very strong within my practice because of the values that were instilled in me, not just, you know, at the shul, but at home. You know, just Shabbat itself is a very special time, and we made it very special in our home. And I have such fond memories. And even today, like, holidays are so important to our family. And it's hard for us when we can't be together, whether it's because, you know, now that my two sisters are married, whether they have to go to their in-laws or there's a pandemic that keeps us apart. It is very hard to be apart from each other during the holidays, even now that we're all grown up. And that's because it was so important to be together when we were growing up, that it was really instilled in us. And I know that we all have those conversations. We've had them this year, and we've had them in the past where we just go, it sucks we can't be together. It sucks you can't be here this year. Really,
especially because I love hosting Pesach, so that was terrible.
And I think that part of that comes from the values and the lifestyle that were instilled in us growing up. And to this day, we all practice differently, but we all value our practice, I believe. I don't want to speak for my sisters, but would you agree with my statement?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, when, you know, we picked a community based on schools and synagogues. That's really how we picked a place to be. We wanted the right school that had what it was that we wanted in terms of Judaism, and we wanted as much Jewish diversity as possible, and we wanted options for synagogues. And so that's kind of how my husband and I picked a place to live. And I think that it's infused everything. I think, you know, having grown up, you know, as an RK has infused everything with regard to the decisions we make. Everything is very well thought out. And, you know, even to the point of this concept where if there isn't something that's being done, you know, figure out a way to be able to do it, and not just sit back and take the status quo. My husband and I, we belong to 3 synagogues. We pay a lot of dues. You know, we had our oldest daughter's bat mitzvah a year ago at one of our synagogues here. It was a Shabbat bat mitzvah. She was the first girl to ever read Torah in the main synagogue, in the main sanctuary on Shabbat morning. It's an Orthodox synagogue. And, you know, one of the reasons why was because we, you know, when we were talking to her about her bat mitzvah 2 years before her bat mitzvah, and we said to her, here are all of your options of things that you can do. She turned to us and she said, wait a second, how could my bat mitzvah not be on Shabbat? And how could it not be with me reading Torah? Like, Shabbat is special, and that's how I want my bat mitzvah. And we had many, many conversations with the rabbi and the board to figure out how to do it and be inclusive as possible. And she was the first one. And, you know, I think that being an RK, there was this idea that though we as sisters, we all differ in a variety of things, in the careers we chose and the way that we practice Judaism. But at the end of the day, you know, our Judaism keeps us all bound in a very significant way. And I think that, you know, that's a huge part of having grown up, you know, with honestly, with both parents who were Jewish educators, not just with a father that was a rabbi, and having those values-driven, the values-driven ideal of what Judaism is inform all of us.
So there are 2 other questions, which actually I think they're more addressed to me. The answer, by the way, yes, when my granddaughter read Torah, there were men present. They were behind the mechitza, but they were there. So the 2 other questions, and then I'm just going to ask if there are any parting shots from the 3 of you. But the questions that I'm putting together is, one is, do you know of any RKs who have rebelled because of their experience as a child of rabbis? I think Rachel actually answered most of that, but stereotypically there are 2 types of RKs. There are the ones who love being RKs and the ones who hate being RKs. And there are quite a few RKs who are who have dealt with the issues of their parents being RKs as well. And then the other question is, from my perspective, what sensitivities did I bring to being a parent? Well, my daughters all know that my experience as a yeshiva kid was such that when I had my bar mitzvah, I walked out of the shul, turned around, blew a kiss, and said, I will never see you again. So I turned off to Judaism for about 5 years. And I always felt, my wife and I always felt that being a rabbi was a burden that we did not want to place on our children. So therefore, we didn't require them to do anything except be children. If they didn't want to go to shul, they didn't. And if they didn't want to stay in shul, they didn't. And we just let them be as free as possible, given the constrictions of what it meant. And perhaps that had something to do with the dynamics today. So are there any parting shots from the three of you?
It's just really
Last
nice
words.
to see. I just want to say it's really nice to see a lot of familiar faces. So hi. It's just really nice to see everybody. So thanks for taking the time.
Agreed. And I know this kind of was brought up before, but I would say, you know, one of the reasons that we are on the Zoom call is because we do fall into that category of, we did, even at times when it might have been hard, we did love being RKs, I would say. And Abba, I know the question came up of what advice would you give an RK? One advice that I would give to the parents of an RK, the rabbi, is a lot of it comes down to whether or not there is pressure put on the child. And I never felt that pressure. As Rachel said, we never felt that pressure from our father. And that really made a difference in our experience. And so, you know, the more you tell a child, you have to do this, you have to do this, there is going to be that resentment, there is going to be that pushback. There's a way to do it without the pressure. And so I think that had a big, I think the fact that we weren't ever made to feel we had to do this, we had to go to shul, we had to sit in the front, we had to be, the fact that we never really felt that really made a difference on, I think, who we all became. And it's a large part of us. So thank you. That my overall was thank you, Al.
Agreed, Meira.
That was clear what I was going for. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel?
No, it's same thing as my sisters. You know, it is great to see so many faces, people that obviously have known us since we were so little, you know, and it's good to see you. And, you know, it's nice to be able to chat about this stuff. I think that I agree wholeheartedly with Merav. I think that, you know, not being forced to do things, I think is the reason why we've all found our way, both in our careers as well as, you know, in our families and in life and in what we do, and allows us to be able to take stock and say what it is that we're thankful for. And so, you know, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to all of you today.
Well, thank everyone. Just two quick notes. One is that next week we will be having the second part of this series where I will be in dialogue with Rabbi Uri Allen, who happens to be an RK and also a rabbi, and we will be talking about some of the challenges of being in the rabbinate, in the pulpit rabbinate and the non-pulpit rabbinate, and some of the highlights and also some of the victories and some of the defeats. And also that this, this program will be on our JSurge website at jsurge.org within the next couple of days. Please, if you are interested, do not hesitate to invite your friends and family to see it. And again, we thank everyone for participating and wish you a good week.
Thank you all for coming.